The abyss does not just stare back. Sometimes it gets hungry. On Little St. James, the blood on the walls was always invisible, hidden behind silk wallpaper and non-disclosure agreements. But when the red balloon drifted over the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, it signaled the arrival of a predator that did not care about blackmail, bank accounts, or blueprints of power. Jeffrey Epstein had spent a lifetime playing God, but he was about to learn that even gods look like cattle to a monster that has been eating worlds since the stars went cold. The humid air of the U.S. Virgin Islands felt like a damp shroud. Jeffrey stood on the balcony of his stone mansion, the one the locals called the Great House. He sipped a glass of expensive vintage wine, but the taste was metallic, like copper pennies. Below him, the blue-domed temple stood silent. Usually, the island hummed with a specific kind of energy, the low vibration of hidden sin, the frantic whispers of staff, the distant sound of a jet engine. Today, it was silent, dead silent. His security detail, a group of ex-Mossad and Special Forces types who cost more per hour than most people earned in a year, had stopped reporting in 30 minutes ago. The cameras showed nothing but static. "Ghislaine?" he called out into the darkened hallway. No answer. He put the glass down. His hands did not shake. Jeffrey did not believe in fear. He believed in leverage. If someone was on the island, they wanted something. Everyone wanted something. Money, silence, or a piece of the future. He just had to find out their price. But as he turned to go inside, he saw it. A single red balloon, bobbing gently against the marble railing. It should not have been there. The wind was blowing out to sea, yet the balloon was moving against the breeze, leaning toward him as if sniffing the air. "Is this a joke?" Jeffrey muttered. He walked toward the balloon, intending to pop it with his cigar. As he reached out, a voice drifted up from the shadows of the staircase below. It was not the voice of a man. It was a cacophony, 1,000 voices layered over one another, ranging from a toddler's giggle to the wet rasp of a dying animal. "Do you like to play, Jeffrey? Do you like to watch the little ones fly?" A figure stepped into the light of the chandelier. It was tall, impossibly thin, wearing a silver and orange clown suit with oversized pom-poms that looked like dried scabs. The face was a mask of cracked white grease paint, dominated by two glowing, amber eyes that seemed to vibrate in their sockets. "I do not know who you are," Epstein said, his voice dropping into the cold, authoritative tone he used to intimidate senators. "But you've made a fatal mistake coming here. My people will have you in the ocean by midnight." The clown tilted its head. A sickening crack echoed through the hall as its neck bones shifted. "Your people! Oh, Jeffrey, your people are marinating." They tasted like cigarettes and broken promises, very bitter. "But you—" Pennywise stepped forward, his boots clicking like claws on the hardwood. "You smell like a feast. You smell like a man who has eaten the innocence of 1,000 souls and kept the receipts. I've been sleeping under the floorboards of the world for a long time, watching you. I thought to myself, there is a man who knows how to season a meal." Epstein reached into his blazer for the compact Glock he kept there. He pulled it and fired 3 times. The suppressed shots were soft thuds in the large room. The bullets hit the clown square in the chest. Pennywise did not flinch. He did not bleed. Instead, the holes in his costume began to smoke, and the smell of burnt sugar and sulfur filled the room. "Guns are for people who believe in endings, Jeffrey," the clown whispered. Suddenly, the clown was not 10 feet away anymore. He was everywhere. The walls of the mansion began to melt. The expensive art, the sketches, the portraits started to distort. The faces in the paintings turned toward Jeffrey, their eyes weeping black bile. The floor beneath his feet softened, turning from marble into a heap of old, discarded children's shoes. Thousands of them, small, worn-out sneakers and Mary Janes, piling up until they reached his knees. "This is not real," Jeffrey hissed, his composure finally cracking. "This is a hallucination. Scopolamine. You drugged the ventilation." "I am the only real thing in your life, little bird," Pennywise roared, his voice now a thundering bass that shook the very foundations of the island. The clown began to dance. It was a jerky, nauseating movement, his limbs bending at impossible angles. As he danced, the room expanded into a gargantuan circus tent made of human skin. The trapeze wires above were made of golden hair, and the audience in the shadows consisted of every person Epstein had ever ruined, their mouths sewn shut with silver wire. "You think you're a monster?" Pennywise sneered, his face suddenly inches from Epstein's. The clown's breath smelled of a graveyard. "You're a parasite, a tick. You hide behind lawyers and islands and shadows. But I am the eater of worlds. I am the nightmare that the nightmares have when they go to sleep." Pennywise's jaw unhinged. Behind the rows of square teeth, a second set of needle-like fangs slid forward, and behind those, a pulsing, rhythmic orange glow. The deadlights. Jeffrey tried to look away, but he could not. His mind, which had spent decades calculating every move, every bribe, and every escape route, began to fray at the edges. He saw the macroverse. He saw the infinite, cold vacuum where Pennywise was born. "I'm going to show you what it's like to be the one who cannot run," the clown whispered. Suddenly, the shoes beneath Jeffrey's feet began to move. They crawled up his legs like leeches. He screamed, a high, thin sound that no one would ever hear. The island of Little St. James began to groan. The temple cracked. The palm trees withered as if struck by a supernatural frost. "Look at them, Jeffrey," Pennywise hissed, pointing toward the dark corners of the grand hall, which now resembled the dripping mouth of a cave. "The ones you thought were forgotten. They are not in your ledgers anymore. They are in my stomach, and they want company." A girl stepped out from behind a tattered velvet curtain. She looked just as she had in 2005, but her skin was translucent, glowing with a sickly, pale light. Her eyes were gone, replaced by the same dancing orange flames that burned inside the clown. "Is it my turn to fly, Jeffrey?" she asked, her voice a hollow echo. Epstein stumbled back, tripping over a pile of moldy stuffed animals that had not been there a second ago. "Get away from me. I have friends. I have names. I can give you anything." "I do not want your names," Pennywise said, his form stretching until his head scraped the high ceiling. "I want your marrow. I want the part of you that thinks it's superior. I want to taste the moment you realize that all your gold is just yellow dirt." The clown's hand, now a massive, multi-jointed claw, swept through the air. The mansion's walls finally gave way, dissolving into a landscape of pure nightmare. The tropical island was gone. In its place was a vast, gray wasteland under a sky the color of a bruised plum. In the distance, a blackened version of the Manhattan skyline loomed, crumbling into a sea of liquid shadow. Jeffrey was strapped to a chair, the same chair from his office, but it was made of cold, rusted iron. Chains snaked around his wrists and ankles, tightening until they bit into the bone. "You spent your life making people disappear, Jeffrey," Pennywise said, crouching down so his painted face was level with Epstein's. "Now it's your turn. But we are not going to make it quick. We're going to savor the rot." The clown reached into his colorful pocket and pulled out a silver whistle. He blew a silent note, and from the edges of the wasteland, things began to crawl. They were the lost things of Derry, the manifestations of 1,000 years of terror, mixed with the specific, oily sins of Epstein's world. They looked like lawyers with no faces, like guards with mouths where their eyes should be, like the very girls Jeffrey had exploited, but twisted into harpies with talons made of broken glass. "They're hungry, Jeffrey," Pennywise whispered, his tongue flickering out to lick a bead of sweat from Epstein's temple. And you're the only thing on the menu. Epstein looked at the approaching horde, then back at the clown. For the first time in his life, the calculation failed. There was no bribe for a cosmic entity. There was no legal defense against a shapeshifter. There was only the hunger. "Please," Jeffrey whimpered. "Oh, please is the best seasoning." Pennywise laughed, and the sound shattered the remaining fragments of Jeffrey's sanity. "It makes the meat so much more tender." The clown opened his mouth, and the deadlights spilled out, blinding and absolute, filling the wasteland with a terrifying, ancient heat. The feast was about to begin. The orange light did not just blind Jeffrey, it unmade him. It stripped away the layers of expensive cologne, the tailored shirts, and the arrogance of a man who thought he had bought his way out of hell. Inside the deadlights, time became a flat, jagged circle. He was not just in the wasteland anymore. He was everywhere he had ever caused pain, experiencing it from the other side of the glass. Pennywise loomed over the iron chair, his form flickering like a dying film reel. One moment he was the clown, the next he was a towering, chitinous horror with 1,000 dripping maws. "Do you feel it, Jeffrey?" the monster crooned, its voice vibrating in Epstein's marrow. "The weight of the souls you thought you traded? They are not gone. They are the bricks in my house. And you are going to be the mortar." The first of the faceless lawyers reached the chair. He did not have hands. His arms ended in jagged fountain pens made of bone. He began to write on Jeffrey's skin, carving non-disclosure agreements directly into his flesh. The ink was boiling lead. Jeffrey tried to scream, but Pennywise reached out and pinched his lips shut with two cold, white-gloved fingers. "Shh," the clown hissed. "Do not ruin the music. I want to hear the sound of your heart trying to beat its way out of your chest. It's like a little bird in a cage. Flap, 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 Jeffrey." From the gray horizon, a massive rusted crane emerged, dragging a cage made of the same iron as the chair. Inside the cage was a version of Jeffrey himself, smaller, weeping, and clutching a stack of burning $100 bills. "That's the part of you that still hopes," Pennywise said, his eyes widening until they filled Jeffrey's entire field of vision. "That's the part that thinks there is a trap door in the floor of the universe. Let's watch it burn together, shall we?" The clown snapped his fingers. The cage plummeted into the sea of liquid shadow. As it sank, Jeffrey felt a part of his own consciousness being dragged underwater, suffocating in a tide of oily blackness that tasted of jet fuel and shame. He gasped for air, but the atmosphere was now pure sulfur. "You're not dead yet, Jeffrey," Pennywise whispered, his face shifting into a perfect, terrifying imitation of Jeffrey's own face, but with the clown's yellow eyes. "I do not let my favorite toys break so easily. We have eons. We have infinities. We have so many opportunities to explore." The clawed hand of the monster reached out and gripped Jeffrey's chest. The ribs snapped like dry twigs. Pennywise was not looking for the heart. He was looking for the ego. He reached inside the wound and pulled out a shimmering, pulsing thread of golden light, the essence of Epstein's worldly power. "Look at it," the clown mocked, holding the thread up to the blinding deadlights. "So bright, so heavy with the blood of the innocent. It's the most delicious thing I've seen in a century. It tastes like betrayal." Pennywise began to wind the thread around his long, pale fingers, pulling it tight. As he pulled, Jeffrey's physical body began to collapse inward, his skin sagging as if the bones beneath were turning to water. The wasteland around them started to vibrate with a high-pitched frequency that shattered the Manhattan skyline in the distance. "You wanted to be a god, Jeffrey," Pennywise roared, his voice now the sound of a mountain collapsing. "But you forgot that gods require worship. And down here, in the dark, I am the only thing anyone worships." The clown leaned in, his jaw widening until it could swallow the sun. The rows of teeth began to spin like a meat grinder. I'm going to eat your everything, Jeffrey. I'm going to eat your name until no one remembers it. I'm going to eat your secrets until they are just whispers in the wind. I'm going to eat your fear until there is nothing left but the hunger. My hunger. The faceless lawyers and the harpies with glass talons closed in, their teeth clicking in anticipation. They began to tear at the edges of the iron chair, pulling at Jeffrey's dissolving limbs. Wait! Jeffrey managed to choke out, his voice a wet rattle. I can show you. The others. The ones in the high places. I can give them to you. Pennywise paused, a glob of black drool falling from his chin onto Jeffrey's forehead. He smiled, a slow, terrifying expression that reached from ear to ear. Oh, Jeffrey, the clown whispered, I already have their addresses. Who do you think gave them the idea to visit your island in the first place? The laughter that followed was not the laughter of a man or even a monster. It was the sound of the void itself, a cosmic belly laugh that echoed through the empty chambers of the universe. Pennywise lunged forward, his teeth meeting in the center of Jeffrey's throat. The iron chair snapped. The wasteland buckled. The deadlights flared into a final, agonizing supernova. On the physical island of Little St. James, the storm finally broke. A bolt of lightning struck the Blue Dome Temple, splitting the roof in two. In the master bedroom of the mansion, a single red balloon popped with a sound like a gunshot. When the smoke cleared, the room was empty. There was no struggle, no body, no sign that anyone had ever lived there. Only the smell remained, the faint, lingering scent of cotton candy in something very, very rotten. The void did not provide the release of death. Inside the gullet of Pennywise, there was only the macroverse, a place where the physical laws of Earth were replaced by the geometry of suffering. Jeffrey felt his consciousness being pulled through 1,000 needle eyes at once. He was a man who had built a life on being the hunter, the observer, the one who controlled the lens. Now he was the lens itself, shattered into 1,000,000 shards, each one reflecting a moment of his own cowardice. Is it cold, Jeffrey? Pennywise's voice was no longer a sound. It was a vibration in the black soup that had replaced the world. The dark between the stars is very, very cold. But do not worry, I'm a fire. I'm the light at the end of the tunnel. Just not the one you were hoping for. The darkness around Jeffrey began to coalesce into shapes. He found himself standing, or existing, in a hallway that went on forever. It was lined with doors, thousands of them, each one marked with a year and a name. This is your library, Jeffrey, the clown whispered, manifesting beside him. Pennywise was now a towering figure made of shadows and old, blood-stained parchment. Every door leads to a room where you thought you were safe. Let's go inside one. The monster kicked open a door marked 1998. Suddenly, Jeffrey was back in the cabin of his jet. The Lolita Express. The leather was soft, the champagne was cold, but when he looked at his hands, they were made of glass. And when he looked across the cabin, he did not see a victim. He saw himself, sitting in the passenger seat, staring back with eyes that were nothing but empty sockets filled with the deadlights. You like to watch, the other Jeffrey said, his voice a hollow rasp. Now watch this. The floor of the plane vanished. The sky outside turned into a screaming vortex of orange fire. The version of Jeffrey in the seat began to peel his own skin off like a wetsuit, revealing a writhing mass of Pennywise's orange silk and spider legs beneath. Every time you flew, the monster Jeffrey hissed, you were just bringing the cattle to the slaughterhouse. But the slaughterhouse was me. I've been under your island, under your townhouse, under your skin. I am the rot that makes the fruit taste sweet to men like you. Jeffrey tried to run back into the hallway, but the hallway was now a digestive tract. The walls were pulsing, wet, and lined with the same silver wire that had sewn shut the mouths of the audience in the circus. He felt the wire beginning to wrap around his own throat, stitching his cries into a silent, internal scream. "You're almost done, little bird." Pennywise's original voice returned, booming from the ceiling of the fleshy tunnel. "The meat is falling off the bone. The ego is dissolved. Now, for the dessert." The scene shifted one last time. Jeffrey was back on the island, standing on the edge of the cliffs overlooking the Caribbean. But the water was gone. In its place was an infinite pile of bones, stretching out to the horizon. Pennywise stood in the center of the bone sea, his clown suit now pristine, glowing with an unbearable, holy whiteness that made Jeffrey's glass eyes crack. The clown held out a hand. In his palm was a tiny, glowing spark, the very last spark of Jeffrey's self-awareness. "This is the part that remembers your mother," Pennywise said with a mock pout. "The part that remembers the first time you felt a flicker of guilt before you drowned it in greed. It's a very small part, Jeffrey, hardly a snack." The clown tossed the spark into the air and caught it in his mouth like a piece of popcorn. As he swallowed, the last of Jeffrey Epstein flickered out. There was no more Jeffrey. There was no he. There was only the sensation of being digested by a god. Back in the physical world, on the ruins of Little St. James, the sun began to rise. The storm had passed. A recovery team sent by friends in high places to retrieve a specific hard drive from a hidden safe stepped off a boat onto the dock. They moved with professional precision, weapons drawn, scanning the silence. They reached the mansion and found the safe. It was open. Inside there were no drives, no ledgers, no tapes. There was only a pile of colorful, sticky confetti and a single, child-sized clown shoe. "Where is he?" the team leader whispered into his radio. "Target is not on site. The place looks like it was hit by a localized hurricane. No sign of struggle, no body." He walked over to the balcony where the red balloon had been. He looked down at the concrete, scratched into the stone, in a handwriting that looked eerily like Epstein's, but far too large, were the words, "The meat was rotten, but the fear was sweet." 1,000 miles away, in a prison cell in New York, a man who looked exactly like Jeffrey Epstein sat up on his bunk. He turned to the security camera and smiled. His eyes flashed a brilliant, predatory orange for a split second before he lay back down and began to hum a circus tune. The world would think he ended himself in a cell. The world would think the secrets died with him. But Pennywise knew better. Pennywise was still hungry, and Jeffrey's friends were still out there, feeling the first delicious stabs of a new, global fear. The hunt was just beginning.